Hi everybody, it's Geordie from Geordie's Cards. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am creating this little trio of MFT Viking cards using a couple of MFT Stamps products. I really like this little Viking stamp and I decided that it was time to do some more practice with my Zig Clean Colour Real Brush markers today. So I have some Bristol Smooth cardstock. I have obviously the little Viking stamp, and I also have this watercolor wash freeform stencil from MFT. So the first thing I did was take a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock that measures 5.5 inches by 4.25 inches. I used some repositionable adhesive on the back just to attach it to my craft mat. And then I'm going to take the stencil and I'm going to use some Distress Oxides to create my background. So I'm just trying to place the stencil as centrally as possible. And then I'm going to hold it down with my little magnets that come with my Make Art station so that it stays in place while I do my inking. So for my first colour combination, I used Chipped Sapphire, Stormy Sky and Shaded Lilac. So I went in with my lightest colour first, which is the Shaded Lilac, and I just added that to the very centre. Then I'm going to blend out with my Stormy Sky, and you'll see this is quite juicy, but that's okay. I really like the Distress Oxides. They're quite forgiving and you can definitely move them around, especially if you use Bristol Smooth cardstock. It kind of moves very, very nicely on that cardstock. So I'm going all the way around right to the edge of the stencil with that colour. And you'll see that most of the Shaded Lilac gets covered, but that's okay because I'll go back in with a second coat of that and then blend it out again. And then finally, I'm going to use my Chipped Sapphire all the way around the edges. And again, it will kind of look quite messy to begin with, but once I've gone back and blended out with my other colours again, it all blends in quite seamlessly and looks really nice. And I really like this colour combination. I kind of wanted something with a little bit of a greyish tone to it, which is why I chose that Stormy Sky colour. But then the other two colours kind of brighten it up again. So I think it looks quite nice. So I'm just going backwards and forwards, making sure all my blends are really nice and smooth. And you can definitely see that hint of kind of lilac colour in the middle. So after I'd completed that one, I was on to my second colour combination. I used old paper, crushed olive and mustard seed for this one. I was aiming for a kind of olivey green, goldish kind of tone. I'm not sure that I achieved it completely with this colour combination, but it was the closest that I could get. And in the end, I was quite happy with it. So again, I'm just doing exactly the same technique. I started with my lightest colour in the centre of the stencil, and then I'm bringing in the crushed olive and going all the way around the outside, and I'll finish up with that mustard seed and go right to the edges with that, and then I'll just go back and blend everything out again, make sure that everything is looking good. Finally, I went in with Rustic Wilderness, Evergreen Bough and Cracked Pistachio for my green combination. So again, starting with that cracked pistachio in the middle, blending out with the Evergreen Bough, and that will go right to the edge of the stencil, but then I'll bring in that Rustic Wilderness just to darken up the edges a little bit. And as before, I'll be going back and forth a few times to make sure that it's all blended out nicely. So after that was done, I took some Bristol Smooth's cardstock and my Versafine Onyx Black ink, and I stamped out my image. I did this 3 times. I didn't show it all on camera because I thought once was enough. So once I'd stamped it out, I used some clear embossing powder and sprinkled that over the top, just to provide some kind of like raised lines over my stamped image. I find this helps when using the Zig Clean Colour Real Brush markers, because it provides almost like a little bit of a well for the colour to sit in without it kind of running over the top, and kind of prevents me from making too much of a mess. So onto the colouring. I started with light brown and my blender pen. I will be listing all the colours and numbers down below if you need to check up on them. And I'm only showing, again, just one image that I'm colouring in. I did all of them exactly the same with exactly the same colours. I did just change up a little bit sometimes where, in this one I'm doing a green kind of tunic underneath, but in one of them I did a blue tunic and green trousers, so I just swapped the colours around, but I used all the same colours on all the images. So I'm just laying in my kind of marker where I want my shadow, and then using my blender pen to pull the colour out and blend it out a little bit to create some shadows and low lights. So now I'm going in with natural beige for his skin. I'm not going to blend this out with the blender pen, I'm just going straight in. It's a very light shade anyway, so you won't really notice it. So now I'm using olive green, which I'm going to use for his tunic. And again, just laying in some colour and then using the blender pen to pull that out and create some shadows and some highlighted areas. For his trousers, I went in with this dull blue colour, which actually ended up looking kind of like jeans. I'm not sure that Vikings wore jeans, but that's okay. I kind of went with it anyway, and I think it looks okay. It's only a tiny piece of colour, and I kind of wanted to go with quite dull colours, dull shades, so I thought this worked quite well. So for his boots, I'm using this dark brown shade. I'll also use that for the handle of the axe, for his belt, and for parts of his helmet as well. For the parts that I wanted to look metal, I used this light grey shade. So for his axe, for his shield. I really don't know what Viking shields were like. I don't know if they were made of wood or whether they were made of metal. Anyway, mine is made of metal, so I used light grey for that. And I think I used a tiny little bit on the centre part of his helmet as well. So I'm using the shade Ochre to add some kind of like bronzy looking goldish kind of highlights to his shield, his belt and his helmet. Then I took that dull blue colour again and I just outlined the kind of edges of his coat there, which I realised I hadn't done before. So I didn't really blend that out too much. It's quite a small area, just used a little bit of my blender pen for those areas. Then I went in with this, it's called grey green or green grey, which I used for his kind of waistcoat, for lack of a better word. I wanted this to look like fur of some kind of beast. You can see it's kind of quite fluffy around the edges. So what I did to try and achieve that was to use some little flicking motions and didn't really blend that out a great deal. I wanted to keep that in to create the look of fur, of some texture to it. So then it was just finishing off his belt with the dark brown marker, and then I used some oatmeal on the horns of his helmet, and then that was the colouring all finished. He's got quite a bit of detail to him, so quite a lot of areas to colour, and I always take longer with my zigs than I do with my Copex, but I'm pretty happy with how he turned out. And as I say, I coloured all the other ones pretty similar. I used exactly the same colours, might have just swapped the areas of where I coloured him in. So after I finished colouring them, I fussy cut them all out using scissors because I don't have the coordinating dies. And then I decided that I wanted to have a stitch detail around the edge and a slight border when I attached it to my card. So I used this A2 stitched rectangle stacks, which is the stacks 1, I believe, and I used the largest rectangle from that. Now I'm just prepping my background with some anti-static powder tool, and I'm using my Versamark ink to heat emboss my sentiments onto the background. So I'm using this detail gold embossing powder that I've had forever, for a long time, and I wanted to go for a gold instead of white for a change. And I did this on all of the backgrounds. I just used a different sentiment from the stamp set for each one. Finally, I just attached some foam squares to the back of my Vikings, and I attached him to my card base. I did exactly the same placement for all 3 of my cards, and I will show you that in a bit. I was having some real trouble getting the backing paper off that tiny little bit that I'd put on his axe handle, but eventually I got there. So I'm just placing him kind of towards the bottom right hand corner of the card, and like I say, I did the same for all of them. So for this one I'm using some MFT cardstock, which is this kind of dull blue colour. I'm not 100% sure of the name of it. It's one that I got in a card kit. So I'm just attaching that to that top folding card base. For the other ones, I used some Stardust Concord and 9th cardstock for my kind of yellowish colour. And for the green, I used Fawn Noble Fir cardstock. And there we go, 3 cards completed. They were quite quick and easy to make. I really hope you enjoyed this one. I had a lot of fun colouring these. Thank you so much for joining me. Please do give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. I'd love to see you come back again. Thank you. Take care.